5 minutes. 5 minutes is still just too long, and I'm not sure really how it's going to affect us, considering we're a pre-existing sign and have been in operations for 3 years, but I don't hear anybody coming up and saying that they don't want these signs, that it's a negative impact to the community. What I hear is a lot of speculation, and I just hope that you take that in consideration here with the adoption of this new ordinance.
Okay. Thank you very much. Ms. Juneman?
No, I just want to wait till, see
Okay.
if he said anything that it's
Okay.
my original question that I'm finally
Okay.
going to bring up.
Are there any other citizens? Welcome, and please state your name and address for the record.
Thank you. My name is Ron Cockrell at 943 Century Avenue. You know, I went to my mailbox today, and 10 pieces of mail, and 8 pieces was junk. You know, I could take it and throw it away. I have that control. You know, we have ordinances and rules for setbacks from our right-of-ways to provide safety and access and that type of thing. And if I want to go into a particular shop, I want to know the hours, where it's located, maybe what the shop does. I really don't want to know if the Twinkies are on sale or not. And at 6 seconds times, you know, that's 10 times I'm in it, blah, blah, blah. They're just going to keep, it's going to be garbage, it's going to be junk mail. I think it's important. I agree with Mr. Neffler. This is a great opportunity with the technology and what we have available to us. But as we're driving down these corridors, there's enough things to contend with in the car, let alone, you know, all the displays that go on around us. So I think easing into it, shorter turnover rate, where if my image is up there for 5 minutes versus 6 seconds, it makes a lot more sense, especially as we get into it and people across the street and other setbacks, and you're trying to minimize the number of dynamic displays that you do have. But as a customer and a consumer, you know, I don't need all of that. I want to know where Kohl's is and what their hours are, and if they happen to have a sale coming up, that's great. But otherwise, I'd like to have my choice to come down the street and not be inundated by all of this movie theater stuff. So moving into it slow, turnover. I mean, these businesses have been in businesses a long time before this product ever was introduced. So they're going to go on doing business. They're seeing this up. Mr. Roshbach is right. People who sell the sign, they want to sell it. People who sell the advertisement, I don't want to sell it. But ultimately, when I'm driving down the street, where is it? And am I going to get there before closing? Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Just as a clarification, staff, I think at a previous council meeting, we had talked about the fact that there wouldn't be necessarily the advertisement of prices or particular items on sale, correct? Or can we go into that a little bit more since that question's come up?
Madam Mayor, our current sign ordinance allows an on-premise sign for advertiser to advertise only products or services sold on site. So they could, the mall could advertise that Gap is selling Guess jeans, and they could advertise a sale at Kohl's, but they could not advertise something off-site, so they couldn't sell advertisement space to a bank or something to that effect.
Okay, so thank you for that clarification. Any other citizens here who wish to speak during the public hearing section of this agenda item? Welcome again.
Thanks. Although I'd agree as well as nobody likes junk mail, I don't either. But as we all know, Americans in the society, it was based on compulsion. And every time I drive by and see 2-for-1 hamburgers at McDonald's, I can swing in and grab one. And the same could be said for the mall. If I see an advertisement for the Gap 50% off jeans, instinct may turn me into the mall to go buy a pair of jeans, which ultimately helps the mall and Gap.
Mm-hmm. Very good, thank you. Let's see, I know Ms. Juneman's question is for after we close the public hearing. Mr. Rosbach, did you have a...
I was just going to comment that if he pulls into McDonald's every time they have
He'll need more jeans.
2-for-1, no, he'll have to get those jeans every time they're on sale.
That's the first thing that I thought of, too.
Okay.
They could tag team them. McDonald's and Guess could be on the same time.
Mr. Nephew, additional questions while we're in the public hearing, or you have a question?
Because it's, you know, it's particularly about the myth. You know, I think you have a tremendously good point about the nature of the purpose of your sign. It's not simply you know, the clothing store. It's a series of different, often wildly different performers. You know, a rap artist, a metal artist, whatever, and that really does serve the wayfinding and the you know, the legitimate purpose of a sign, and is a good use for the technology. So the question So first, I do want to acknowledge that, because I think that's an example of the value that these signs can have for people seeing what something in their community is offering. Wasn't there some discussion we were having was it the last meeting, of some idea of, the Aldrich Arena was another one that we were talking about, of whether venues that have multiple tenants sequentially rather than simultaneously could be seen as qualifying for comprehensive sign plans?
Councilmember Nephew, that was brought up and discussed also by Alan Cantrud and I was uncertain whether to just take the initiative and put that in, but that is, of course, a possibility in our sign code, is to allow those theatrical venues to also have a comprehensive sign plan, which would allow them to have varying changeover rates if appropriate.
The other thought was to have it as a special district, if I could chime in, a theater district where it's not necessarily multiple tenants, but it's multiple events within the same venue. Aldrich Arena qualifies, obviously. Every weekend there seems to be something different going on. Certainly the manager of the Myth has pointed out that they derive their entire revenue from a revolving door of acts. Different than, say, a movie theater where you've got the same static act that's available for, in some cases, 10 weeks. And they're also listed in the paper, et cetera, et cetera. And the community center would be another example where, that deserves a special district, if you will, because there are multiple events going on in there as a facility. So that might justify a different handling of the message on a sign like that.
And if I may, Madam Mayor, one point to consider, and that I was struggling with, is if the Myth or Aldrich Arena, those are all theatrical type venues, community center, but of course churches, they have theater, and like Hill Murray High School, so these are things to consider if you wanted that in the ordinance. Is that really your intent?
For the district's idea, that might sidestep the sequential tenants kind of thing if we didn't quite want to open this up to televisions on the churches. How exactly would that work up in terms of ordinances to allow for the creation of a theatrical district?
Can you maybe rephrase that?
What do we do practically? Is there a line in this ordinance that says we now will have a theatrical district, or do we have to put something in the comp plan that assigns it as a land use, or what's the mechanism for defining an entertainment district of that?
We could certainly work on that and integrate it into the sign code, define a district as, these are the sorts of venues that we're going to consider to be within the special district, and allow them a different changeover rate. It's handling different signs in different places differently. And I think the reason that staff's always supported the comprehensive sign plan notion is that you get to integrate some aesthetics with that. And I think the whole idea was it was a campus, and correct me if I'm wrong, Sean, but that was the initial idea behind using that existing sort of well-understood method of treating different signs differently with that. So that's why it's still there sort of as is.
Mr. Rosbach, do you have additional comments with regard to this aspect?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
So I'm wondering if we couldn't move ahead with the ordinance that's before us, but then ask that, I don't know what to call it, but that we direct the staff to do a little bit further in-depth with the thought about the theater district type of situation, and also if we could gain a little bit better understanding of how much money is actually involved in these signs, and what the people who are wanting to put them up are getting out of them. Because I don't really think, I know I don't have a clear understanding of that, but my impression is that like Clear Channel and their billboards is shoveling the stuff into the wagon as fast as they can with their 8-second turnover rates. And so if we could get the people from the mall, as an example, get the Myth involved, maybe reach out to a couple other groups and say, here's what the city is concerned about, and what the council is concerned about, and yet we want to have the opportunity to explore these other areas and make sure that we are doing justice for those operations in our cities that need special consideration. And so rather than try to jump into something now, that we just ask the staff to keep working forward on that particular aspect of it, and then we can always revise something if it seems appropriate.
Go ahead, Mr. Cantor.
And Madam Mayor, we can certainly explore that if that's the directive of the council. I just caution against having information like that that might tend to, have a decision weighed about or weighed upon with the idea in mind that whatever someone's making is going to be the basis for it, because, that wouldn't be a justifiable reason to restrict or to allow anything. So we can get that information for you if it's available, but it shouldn't go into a decision on where to put signs.
Well, I think that that's part of, though, of their pressure to have us have a shorter period of time.
Certainly.
And so, you have to be able to judge why they're so excited about it. Are they excited about it because they can't get people into their stores, or this is another avenue for them to make revenue? And so we want them to be able to get people into their stores. I don't particularly care whether they make a bunch of money doing it.
Okay. Before I close the public hearing, if there's anyone here who has a comment about this new idea about creating certain districts, certainly this would be a time that you could come up and talk about it before I close the public hearing, since this is a new idea. Okay. With that, then I'll close the public hearing. Let's see here. Ms. Juniman, you had a question.
Thank you. It's, I don't know if it's a question or a comment question. I'll drop the bomb since nobody else seems to want to. While I think it's perfectly logical and reasonable to want to back everything up that we do with studies, anybody can do a study and tell you something that you think you want to hear and bend it one direction or the other, and life is that way now, so we do it. But I think there's more than public safety at stake here, and Ron did a nice lead-in for me. It's just that was a long time ago. I think there's a piece of this that we're obligated to think about, and no, it's not quantifiable in a legal let's go to court sense, but it's quantifiable for the people who live here. And this all started actually long ago. Some of us can remember that long, and some of us haven't been here long enough to remember, when people were saying, all right, one of the reasons, there were a number of political reasons to have the sign ordinance redone, but there was a piece, and it came from the Design Review Board, as I recall, that said, all right, the people that live here have a certain sense of how they want this community to look and what they want to see when they drive down the street. And while that's not a legal terminology thing that you can maybe put a meter out and measure, to me it matters in this community, because we supposedly yak about how we want to know what the citizens think and how we represent them, but if business comes in and rattles our cage, we get nervous. Now, that's not blowing off business. I know that's how we run, okay? I'm not quite as dull as some people think I am. But striking that balance is always what we're charged with, and at this particular kind of an issue, it's bigger to me. And Ron's point is well taken, if you ask me, and I've heard it from other people, and the Design Review people brought it up long ago. And yes, unless you've lived in a hole for 40 years, or at least your head's been there, you know that you can't run a community without a tax base, blah, blah, blah. Business have to succeed. Yeah, been here, heard that, know it. It's a given that we know that. But I don't think we need to weigh just that. And staff has been working on this for a long time, talking to lots of different kinds of people, and part of their motivation for even starting to look at this had to do with Design Review Board. And people who, on that board, and who went to them and said, how do we want this community to look? No, we don't want it to look backward. No, we don't want it to look like a town of 300. Yeah, God, been there, done that, know what people are thinking. But on the other hand, that piece about what you want to see in our busiest corridor plays a little bit here. And so we can talk about traffic studies and people bashing into the rear ends of other people till we're purple, and somebody will say, well, the MnDOT says this, and that police department says that. And in Podunk, Idaho, they don't worry about this because they still have signs they paint themselves. Who cares? This community is ours. And if we want to have a sign ordinance that's slightly more